compliance to those low P commands. Intervention was going to be preceding every low P command with a series of high P commands, and note compliance to low P commands. What she did prior to intervention, which shows up on this slide here, is the percent compliance when she delivered these commands at least 10 times in the classroom prior to baseline. So this was a pre-screening, pre-assessment step that we were doing. And again, those in the low P area were the behavior that we were going to count, and those in the high P commands became our intervention. This is the ABA results, the figure that we used. Again, baseline, intervention, back to baseline, back to intervention, and I'll talk about the last part, which is the medication part, in a second. So, baseline. During the morning session, which ran anywhere from 9 o'clock until noon, because we wanted to keep this as a natural routine of the student. So we didn't want to ask these random low probability command questions every minute. So she tried to incorporate the questions into the context of her daily morning routine. She delivered 10 low P commands every session. We then counted the percent compliance to those low P commands. So the first baseline session shows the first session at 30, second session at 20, and then 0, 10, 0, 10, 10. So during baseline, the student complied to these low probability commands, right? These commands on the top part of this slide, between 30% and 10%. We ran at least 5 days of baseline, and although we see a trend going down, we notice that the last 4 or 5 data points are relatively stable between 0 and 1. That established our stable baseline. Now we move to the second phase, intervention. Intervention looked like this. We, again, used 2 or 3 of the high probability commands. Clap your hands. If the child was compliant, we said, great job clapping your hands, touch your toes. If the child was compliant, we said, great job touching your toes, now please sit down. So the low P command was preceded by 2 or 3 high P commands. Every high P command that was completed was provided with positive reinforcement. Great job jumping up. Great job giving me 5. Great job tucking your head. And then low P command was delivered, noting compliance to the low probability command. During the intervention phase, we saw an immediate jump from baseline to intervention. And we saw stability between 80%, 70%, and 90%. After 5 days of intervention, went back to baseline. Back to baseline, the baseline data, the compliance to just the low P commands dropped down to 20%, 30%, 20, 10, 10, and 10. So the second baseline phase performance looks an awful lot like the first baseline phase performance. So again, our graph begins to look like that blueprint of the rationale we spoke of before. Because we don't want to end in a baseline phase, we went back to intervention.